All right, cool. I guess I'll not waste any more time. Thank you, everybody, again for joining us. I think we have a few more joining our audience, but let's get some introductions going. My name is Shane. I run the events over at 10 Capital Network, and we have a great investor reverse pitch with Liam Krut of Reinforced Ventures. If you have any questions in the audience during our session, you can go ahead and use our chat box to type those in, and we'll get to them if we can. With that, I'm going to hand it off to our CEO, Hall Martin, to get Liam introduced and get things going.
Great. Thanks, Shane. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And in particular, I want to thank Liam Krut of Reinforced Ventures to talk about the value investing in deep tech. We see a lot of deep tech deals coming out now. We think there's going to be a lot of investment in the future as the space continues to grow. There's a lot of great technologies that are coming out that are being commercialized, and many of our investors want to participate in those as well. After Liam, we have two presentations for you as well that can showcase some of these technologies to you also. With that, let me pass it over to Liam. And Liam, go ahead and launch your slides and tell us a little bit about yourself and your fund, and then let's talk more about deep tech.
Great. Thank you very much, Hall, and appreciate you guys for hosting me today. Regarding my background, I studied economics and computational biology. This was, for being an entrepreneur, I want to be both technical as well as having business skills. Then launched two companies. The first was in the mRNA therapeutic space. It's a topical therapeutic that we were developing. And the second was in the blockchain space. After that, kind of took some time working for other people. I worked in data science, building deep learning algorithms and doing public health research, and then spent a year doing outsourced private equity due diligence on the technical side. And I've been with Reinforced Ventures for 3 years now, investing in overlooked areas of deep tech. So I have a traditional deck here, which I'm happy to go through and share with you guys. But I've made some updates to it to make it a bit more specific to our topic. So can you see my screen all right?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
All right. So just to give some context for the market, it does seem that right now the market's bottoming out. We had absurdly low interest rates for a number of years, and a lot of money printing that was happening that created a huge influx of capital and very high valuations in early stage investing. That's luckily gone through for the most part, where now there's kind of a reshuffling of the deck, and just like 2008 and 2009 were pretty much the best time to invest in early stage companies a decade ago. We're seeing similar valuations and figures here. The large exception to that is artificial intelligence, right? Still a lot of people investing in generative AI and large language models, but for the most part in other areas of hardware and wetware, aka robotics, biotech, autonomous systems, advanced materials, for the most part, we're seeing very low valuations, and there's new openings in the economy where people are able to take positions at fairly reasonable prices in companies that are likely to be the market leaders for the next decade. So our firm has spent, I guess, almost the past 3 years now looking for these overlooked opportunities. We're essentially getting in at good prices before certain trends break out. So while in traditional value investing, you can look at, the total value of assets a company has, how much cash they have on hand, right? Think of investors like Warren Buffett, Seth Klarman. That's more difficult to do in deep tech, right? Because this is fundamentally a field of science, of lab experiments, and teams without previous business experience that you're helping them commercialize these things. So you have to evaluate for things that are fairly qualitative, whether that's the team or the technology or the timing of commercializing that technology. We're a small firm. We invest in mainly pre-seed deals, usually writing $100,000 to $200,000 checks. And a lot of this deal flow for finding these overlooked, underpriced opportunities come from a fairly wide network. So there's a number of engineers, scientists, entrepreneurs we work with across the world who will send us deals for things that maybe don't fit a buzzword or a trend or a hashtag that's currently out there. And you do see that with a lot of the deep value guys in the hedge fund space today. Think of people like Carlyle and whatnot, who, they are looking for weird opportunities like telecom companies on the Italian head stock exchange or whatnot, things that are essentially off the beaten path. Just as a bit of context, I already told you guys about myself. My partner Ewan is currently head of product at Waymo, and if my technical expertise is more on the data science and the computational biology side, his is more on the robotics and the autonomous systems side. And we also have a good split for deal flow. He's normally getting deal flow from large corporations. I'm getting deal flow from universities and startup ecosystems. So how do we do this? How do you find companies that are in overlooked areas and are fairly underpriced? Well, I think the big thing for this is having the right constraints, right? Because there's infinite places you can look, and there's way more places that you shouldn't be looking as opposed to places you should be looking, right? There's a lot more difficulty in having the right criteria for what you think the future will be than having the constraints for what the future won't be. And so ultimately, we're not trying to predict the future, right? Just like in public markets where you might not be trying to predict the price point for, Coca-Cola or Geico or any of these companies that Warren Buffett purchased, but you're merely seeing like the value is underpriced. It's unlikely to go to zero. It's probably going to go up from here. We're doing something similar where, we're not investing in the trendy areas. We're trying to find those things that are going to be trendy in 5 to 10 years. And if we have the right constraints, then we're not going to waste our time looking where everyone else is looking. And we're going to be more open to seeing those opportunities that are overlooked. So the three kind of big global constraints that we use for finding underpriced deals are: one, irreplaceable competency. So the founder is someone who has invented a new field. This is often a technology that hasn't been commercialized before and is very expansive. The way we like to jokingly put it is, if the founder was hit by a bus, no one would be able to do what they do, right? So these are fairly dense, fairly technical areas that can take a while to understand and evangelize about. A lot of this comes from previous work I've done in private equity where, you have key man risk. You're trying to find out, well, if the CTO or the CEO, retires, who takes on what responsibility? And we've essentially flipped that risk on its head, where now it's a competitive moat. Second is a platform play. So we're only looking at technologies that can influence or commercialize in 5 to 10 different fields. Ideally, these are fields that are unrelated. So a lot of our biotech companies, yes, they want FDA approval, but they also have product lines for the automobile industry or for the robotics industry. We're looking for companies that have multiple shots on goal across multiple disparate areas. And third of all, as I keep saying over and over, we're looking for overlooked areas. So conceptually, this means when software development tools were really big a few years ago, we instead invested in AI traceability. When protein folding was big, right? Even Facebook was doing protein folding 2 years ago. We instead invested in a company using computational models for lipids and carbohydrates. Everyone knows about reusable rockets with SpaceX. Instead, we invest in space planes. And when everyone was investing in battery startups, we found one Carnegie Mellon startup that had reinvented the clutch. So the clutch you would use for a manual vehicle, they have a new design for that works for not just car engines, but also safety harnesses, power tools, even airplanes, trains, and exoskeletons. So here are some examples of qualitative ways that we will actually price these things out. So as I said before, pre-seed companies can often be 2 kids in a garage with a dog. So it's hard to, take in their cash flow or their cash on hand or things like that from Charlie Munger or whomever. But there are other things that you can do to help determine if a company is underpriced or not. So one mental model that we work through is bundling versus unbundling. So we started getting into the semiconductor space before geopolitical issues started heating up with Taiwan, because we noticed that the CPU, the computer processing unit, was starting to unbundle. And you had the graphics processing unit, right, for cryptocurrency, for video streaming, for machine learning. And eventually Google, with their cloud platform, came out with the tensor processing unit for deep learning, for large language models, things like that. And that still hasn't offered the capacity that they've needed. And so we placed bets for other forms of processing units that we think will be a part of a further bundling here. In addition to that, we also look for cross sections. So we'll invest in hardware companies working in the biotech space. We love investing in people who are jumping outside their domain. So they might be biologists working with computer vision systems, or they might be physicists working with novel robotic systems. Reflexivity is a principle from George Soros. So that essentially means, if markets anticipate something, it actually might be less likely to happen. So classic example in the energy markets, if people expect an oil crisis or an oil shortage, and then they bid up the prices of oil futures, you end up not having a shortage. Or a simpler example might be, when I lived in North Carolina, people expected water shortages due to a hurricane. And so if a hurricane was coming, everyone would fill up their bathtubs with water. And even if the water supply got cut off from the hurricane, everyone still had water. And so by anticipating something to happen, it actually ends up not happening. There's a lot of great examples of how this can occur with startups. Another example would be bottlenecks. So we recently made investment in the virtual reality space. The big bottleneck for virtual reality is walking, right? We've got vision down, we've got sound down, we've got reflexes and control. Haptics is getting there, but still, when people try to walk in VR, you pay thousands of dollars for a treadmill, or you hit your shin into the couch, you get dizzy, you lose your sense of direction, right? There's all these issues there. So we invest in Ecto VR, which has a novel boot that you put on, and the robot boot moonwalks you to the center of the room, whether you're on carpet, hardwood, or cement. We'll also do complementary technologies. As I said, everyone's investing in batteries. So we'll invest in clutches or in LED screens and things that reduce the energy or the power usage for those complementaries to battery systems. We'll also invest in intermediaries. So when everyone was investing in quantum computing, which was still 10 years out, we were asking what types of processing units are going to be important in the next 5 to 7 years before quantum computing becomes a real commercial viable use case. Missing stack layers are also important. So in the autonomy stack, what is missing for data labeling? In the real world autonomy stack, what's missing for very low Earth orbital satellites? And we go out and we try to find those companies that can fit within those gaps. There's also first mover advantage, which is usually the area that we go to. This has been especially important lately for regulatory frameworks. So we've often invested in serial entrepreneurs who have been able to get in first and become the industry standard. So, as the FDA regulations were recently put through with the Biden administration, allowing companies to enter clinical trials without animal data, what's going to be the new industry standard for preclinical research? And we invested in a company called Vitroscope, which we believe is taking that on. In direct opposition to first mover advantage, you also have second mover advantage, right? The second mouse is the one that gets the cheese. For us, that's normally been investing in corporate spinouts. So when an employee maybe builds something 2 or 3 times over for their employer, and then they decide to do it on their own. Good example of that would be Stanza Systems out of Ireland. They had built out a essentially development testing and server testing for Google and for Facebook and for all the large companies, and decide, why not just build our own company to do this? And then the last thing I'll mention is that, despite it being deep tech, one of the most important qualitative features is that, things should work out of the box. So we invest in magic over technology, and all of our companies that we've invested in, they're able to ramp up some fairly R&D heavy stuff, but make it work in a way that even the least sophisticated consumer is going to have a good experience with. So these are, definitely the areas that we focus on. It's not completely exhaustive, but just some examples of qualitative facets that help us kind of price in what a pre-seed deep tech company could look like. And lastly, I'll mention, this isn't just me doing this. Like, we have a huge network of investors and engineers across our fund who help us find these companies and have been incredible help for us in getting these deals before the next set of trends come up for the late 2020s and early 2030s. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Liam. I had a few questions myself, and if those in the audience have questions, please put them in the chat box. I work with a lot of deep tech companies out of Los Alamos Labs, and one thing I find people focus a lot on is early stage grants, SBIR, NIH, et cetera. When you see a startup with that, how do you weight that in the investment decision? How much do you give to that versus, well, that's just money I don't have to put in?
Great question. The answer is both. I affectionately refer to it as cyber sugar, and there's definitely some companies who know how to use it and others who don't. I think if you'd asked me the same question 2 years ago, I would have said that it can be a fairly big distraction, and phase one is fine, but by the time you're doing phase two, like, commercial customers should be your main area of focus. That might be changing now, especially with later stage fundraising. A lot of firms like to see dual use companies that have applications both in the commercial as well as the government or the defense space. This has been put under the banner of what's the term? Reshoring, or Andreessen Horowitz and a few others just launched new funds around, like, essentially American revitalization. And so, I think today I probably see phase two or phase three grants as being better than I would have 2 years ago, just because there seems to be a smoother transition point, and it looks like it's a better market signal than it used to be.
And what do you expect them to do with that grant? Whenever somebody raises funding, a question follow-on investors will ask is, well, what did you do with the money? How much did you accomplish with it? And I often find people raising the money end up writing white papers where I'm really pushing them to do MVPs and prototypes. But what do you take on that? What's your take on that?
Sure. So I would say that white papers nowadays are important for community engagement and network effects. So, for instance, we invest in Exaloop, and they're building out an ecosystem for Python developers who want to run their code 10x or even 100x faster. You can find their GitHub repository online. And white papers in their case are very important. For other companies that, could use it as sales materials, it kind of just depends who their target user and customer is. Is it a business person, or is it an engineer who's actually going to be writing the check and submitting it to accounting?
Right. And what do you do about the startup that comes in where it's basically the CTO masquerading as a CEO? Do you invest in that deal, or do you not invest in that deal?
We do. There's a couple ways to bridge that. So option one is the CTO capable of growing into a CEO? So oftentimes this is why tangents are important during pitches. Understanding what books the person has read. Do they just understand their field? Do they have interest outside of it? And I mean, some of our best leaders and executives were just nerdy PhDs, but they got some polish. They learned how to say things simply. They became charming. There are all these skills that they were able to build out. So, not all CEOs are born. Some are made later in life. The other thing I'll mention that we've been doing a lot more of lately is kind of pairing up wartime and peacetime CEOs. So oftentimes the first CEO can be very technical, can be slightly disagreeable and is the type of person who's willing to work, tooth and claw and fight to the death to make their company get to where it needs to be. Eventually, as the company scales up and they need to build partnerships and head towards an acquisition or a public offering, if you have another co-founder who's maybe more charming, more personable, that person can make a good peacetime CEO to scale up and build out those relationships you already have. So those are the two means that we usually go about it. But as a third route in biotech, it's fairly commonplace for someone to be the first CEO, and then once they get to the Series A, their lead investor or one of their advisors will find, or maybe even come in themselves as a seasoned gray-haired executive who can then scale up the company.
What do you think about interim CEOs? Their job is to get the funds raised and the first product out the door, and you have to do that in the next 2.5 years, and then you're gone. What would you invest in that?
We haven't. We've passed on it in the past. Being deep tech focused, a number of our companies have opportunities to exit in 2 to 5 years, but really we're trying to pull for people who are going to own multiple billion-dollar markets. And so someone whose interests might be aligned for more of that 2 to 5 year timeframe might not be the ideal fit for us. So we're not categorically against it, but it's definitely not something that we prioritize for as few investments as we make per year.
For your fund, how far along do they have to be in order to get the investment? Is it a great idea, validated with the grant, product built, revenue growing? Where do you want to come in?
We've done all the above, especially in this market. Things are in absolute chaos, which we love. It's been making things a lot easier. We can take more time to get to know the founders. But we've invested in napkins, right? It's just an idea that someone wrote down in 3 sentences or less. We've invested in companies with millions of dollars in revenue. Kind of our bigger point is around valuation. So usually we're investing at around $10 million post-money valuation or lower. The founders are irreplaceably competent, and it's a foundational technology that can impact multiple industries and is not a buzzword. So those are really the things that we kind of prioritize more highly.
Great. And tell us more about your network of scientists. How did you build that group, and how do you work with them on a regular basis?
Yeah, great question. My co-founder, Ewan, he started angel investing in 2013 or 14. A lot of people would send him deals. So being a Google executive, certainly has its perks. And he had a personal pain point of, how do I coordinate my friends and I investing in these great deals together? So he started a syndicate on AngelList, and we invested out of that for about 1.5 years. That grew from 15 to 20 friends to well over 1,700 within that syndicate, mainly technical people. So other syndicates might be more focused on real estate people or investment bankers. Our syndicate just happens to have a very disproportionately high number of engineers who we get actively involved to, forgive the pun, reinforce our portfolio companies. And that's kind of what they want, right? These are people who like to fix problems. They don't want to just be giving their money. They want to also give their time and help these companies. So we do that in structured ways, like having portfolio showcases, as well as informal, hey, so-and-so, would you mind meeting with this company sort of deal. And then in October 21, we launched a proper fund and have been using that to coordinate people more properly.
Great. A lot of deep tech deals do well with corporate venture capital. What's your coaching there? Do you encourage them to go after that, or to avoid it because of the potential exclusivity that may come with that?
It's a double-edged sword. The thing that seems to be the biggest indicator of whether it's a good idea or not is how quickly it goes. So we have a portfolio company right now. They're expecting it to take 1 year for them to close a corporate investment that they're receiving. But with that, they're going to get a large commercial contract that's non-exclusive. We also have other situations where, people will come in as advisors or not. So, the way I view it in general, it's good when you can get it. It does lead to, a more robust customer pipeline, but it can often be very time intensive and have a lot of difficult handholding with it. So I would definitely ask for referrals from other companies in their portfolio to see what their experience has been working with that corporate VC.
Great. One of my themes in coaching early stage is the team should be complete at all levels. And in the early stage is somebody building it and somebody else selling it. And so for deep tech, I'm often coaching them, go find somebody to do the selling part because I'm talking to the person who's building it. What's your coaching on building out teams? What do you tell them to do?
The thing that works best for us, it's fairly simple and obvious, but during due diligence was if they can hire out of the laboratory that they worked in, and usually that keeps their that's all they need for hiring for the next 2 years. And that means that if they're hiring their lab mates, they know which people are gregarious and charming and could fit in well in a sales role while still being technical enough to answer any questions on their own, as well as they've been friends, right? They've been hanging out together on the weekends and hanging out on the weekdays in the laboratory for a few years. So they have good rapport, they have good friendships, and they know they're going to work together. So it actually, there's a second side to that as well, which is, one important factor for us is, are the people in your laboratory willing to work for you? So we often ask for a list of which people want to work with them that were their previous lab mates, because if their lab mates don't want to work for them, then what truly competent people are going to work for them?
I've heard one of the recent changes that may change the dynamic, but is to be seen, is that today, unlike 10 years ago, where everybody had to come together physically in one location and work in an office, today, most people are actually going to work remote and distributed. And that means you can recruit anybody from anywhere now to connect in with the team. They don't always have to be in the same room all the time. What's your take on remote work and how that may change the calculus here?
I honestly still think it's too soon to tell. Most of the companies we've invested in I've never met face to face. And I was very skeptical of that at first. My dad was an interrogator for the police and military. So, growing up, body language and how the feet were positioned, if the legs were crossed, were all super important things that, we talked about at the dinner table growing up. But, that's worked out well for a firm. We were listed as one of the top 50 emerging firms last year. So it hasn't been a problem for us. I think regarding teams, it can work well, especially if they do quarterly or annual retreats. Being that we're more in, physical things, right? Like hardware and biotech. Oftentimes our teams tend to be in the same space. And I mean, for what it's worth, I just noticed that the teams that are physically in the same space tend to iterate and evolve more quickly than the ones who are remote. There seems to be a lag time in communication when you're just checking in over Zoom or Slack, even if you're disciplined about it and you're doing it once a day. And I don't have data on this, it's anecdotal, but it's not an absolute, but definitely there's a preference that people are physically located in the same space.
Great. Well, if anybody in the audience has any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box. We'll answer them in the second half of this hour. And Liam, any final words you'd like to say about deep tech investing?
Yeah, I think the thing I would just mention is I'm really excited about the next 24, 36 months. A lot of investors have been very focused on artificial intelligence applications, and that's kind of left an absence of investors in the robotics space, in the tech bio space, and other areas. And so it's been a really exciting time. And we're just hoping to meet more companies and founders who are building things that are unconventional and might not fit a trend or a buzzword, but they think could impact multiple industries. And it's been wonderful to find those founders as well as having them come to us and find us.
Great.
So thanks for having me, Hal.
Great. Thanks for joining. And we have now another presentation from Ping Ye of Voxy. Looking forward to your thoughts on it, Liam, at the end of it. Ping, if you go ahead and share your screen, let's learn more about Voxy and what you're doing there with Deep Tech.
Sounds great. And thanks, Liam. I really enjoyed your presentation. My name is Ping. I'm CEO of Oxy Health. We are a company that is extracting insights and intelligence from VOCs, or chemicals from the breath. So in listening to Liam's talk, it was fascinating. I think we check a lot of boxes that he was talking about. One of them is, a lot of people are looking at blood, but we're looking at the breath, and we're an intersection of multiple technologies, which I'll get into here in a second. My background really quick is 15 years in tech as a nanotechnologist, and then everything changed after surviving blood cancer. And the last 10 years, I've been in the health technology side of the industry. So Voxy Health, of course, as a diagnostic company to measure diseases, various diseases, first focused on lung cancer. We want to affect millions of lives through early detection of disease. This is an unusual venture. Yes, we were just incorporated in September of last year, but it's in work for nearly 10 years. And so quite a bit of issued patents already. A lot of investment from Boston Scientific, where I am today. It's where our labs and office space are here in Minnesota, another overlooked region, sometimes in the Midwest, overlooked place for deep tech technologies. But hopefully, in what I share today, drives some interest. Getting some really great early indications on the statistics that you see there, which I'll get into. We're raising $5 million right now. We're about $500,000 away from hitting that target. It's a 20% discount or 20 million post-money cap. And things are moving quite well given the current environment. Use of proceeds are to run a couple more pilots and then get into the clinical trial. I'll get into that as well in the commercialization side of things. We're a Minnesota company, and we've been approved for what's called the Angel Tax Credit, which gives investors 25% of their money back the next year, which is a great deal for investors. Given the time, I just want to share that people have probably been touched by cancer, either personally or through family members. Lung cancer, like many other diseases, unfortunately, are diagnosed late. 84% of lung cancers are diagnosed late, and has major impacts on outcomes. If you can find it early, it's about 10x improvement in survival rates, 5-year survival rates. So it is a big deal. And of course, the impact on the economy and the families when it is unfortunately diagnosed late. Huge costs there. And it's those that are following the trends of diagnostics. Cancer diagnostics is no different, growing tremendously in all the major cancers. Given that we are a platform, can touch many of these cancers, and also the ones with unmet needs, like ovarian cancer, for example, since we're just looking at VOC patterns, which I'll get into over the next few slides. The purpose of this slide is just really hammer home that unfortunately, symptomatic discovery of disease often is late-stage discovery. So we want to be as early as possible, and to have a non-invasive, super easy to use device, 1 minute of breathing, basically like a mass spec in your hand, is something that we think will be pretty transformative to many people. So there it is in the picture. I'm holding it up if you can still see me on your screens. It is basically a printed circuit board inside of this handheld device. You can put a mask or a mouthpiece on there to breathe into. It's 1 minute. We generate a bunch of, essentially what we're doing is we're taking chemical information and on the spot turning it into electrical information through a completely new sensor that was developed by Boston Scientific and the University of Minnesota. From that data, we want to extract insights and impact the lives of patients and really inform physicians. We did not invent VOCs or discover them. They've been studied for decades, but with devices that are about the size of a microwave to a refrigerator in size. And essentially what we've done is shrunk it down and taken a completely different approach. So we're not looking at a handful of biomarkers, but we're looking at all disease-related VOCs and producing an electrical pattern from them, and leveraging machine learning to extract information from those patterns. We can affect many large markets. within cancer is itself would keep us quite busy, but this can be used for infectious diseases, injuries, you name it. It's a metabolic measurement of kind of the perturbation of the body we can measure. This slide really, when I first started advising this team after my first company that I founded, which ironically, Liam, was in the industrialization of human brains, this, part of the biotech world for drug discovery. When I first met with this team after that company a year and a half ago, the team showed me this slide, which really blew my mind, some work in Europe showing that VOCs that are produced when healthy can actually shift when one has lung cancer. And it's the same for other cancers. And new VOCs are produced. And so instead of measuring a dozen or so and looking at thresholds, which can be a little bit challenging, which has kind of been the barrier for many VOC-based breath companies, we're looking at overall patterns and not just, oh, is this one VOC exceeding some threshold or under some threshold? We use this device early on. The low-hanging fruit for us, our intended use is risk stratification. So a nodule has been identified in a CT scan, and we want to advise the physician if they should be wait and see or to do a biopsy. And unfortunately, 2/3 of the time, there is uncertainty amongst the physicians on what to do. 1/3 of the time, it's very clear it's cancer or it's not cancer, but 2/3 of the time, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unneeded biopsies are done. Or wait and see is taken when a biopsy should be done. And that's where we want to play as well. And then as you can imagine, going to the right or the left of this care pathway, we can go to screening after that, or we can go into surveillance after that. So what's the secret sauce? The secret sauce is the combination of nanosensors, so wafer-produced circuitry, but on top of that is a way that's been developed over the last several years on a single layer of carbon. So we produce a single layer of graphene, but that's not it. They spent the last decade figuring out how to put a single self-assembled monolayer of receptor chemistry on that graphene. So it works in the realm of quantum capacitance, where VOCs that interact with this surface energy and surface chemistry that's been laid down over the graphene actually shifts in capacitance. And so we produce these capacitance voltage plots, and from those plots, we extract out information so that we can have a device that's accessible, accurate, and quite approachable. So just to dive a little bit deeper and peeling the onion on how it works, here's our desktop unit circuit board. There's 40 chips on it. Each chip has 3 sensors. Each chip has a unique surface chemistry. So when you look at lung cancer as this example, and within lung cancer, there's different cell types, adenocarcinoma, squamous cell, and on, they produce different chemicals. Each chemical will interact with their class of chips, but each chip will respond to each chemical uniquely in electrical ways. So it's a cross-functional array approach, kind of the opposite approach of what's been done in diagnostics, and saying we're going to look at patterns as opposed to a handful of biomarkers. And it works. So from this data, you're looking at various parameters and different surface chemistries and these radar plots, but essentially leveraging simple data science, we're able to show that, yes, we can take these parameters and completely bifurcate the populations. In this case, control healthy on the bottom left, blue, and orange, lung cancer, yes. And early machine learning approaches are telling us we have pretty decent sensitivity and specificity, PPV and PV values as well. And we expect as we test more, which currently we've been doing this on 200 people, hopefully we more than double that by the end of the year, we see these numbers improving. I want to give some time for questions, but there's a few more slides left. This slide is just to hammer home maybe Liam's point earlier, that this is one hardware platform that we don't have to change for any other disease, whether it's dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, general health and wellness related VOCs, to even brain injury. We don't have to change this hardware. We're just going to measure the patterns with the same old thing. Competitive advantage, at a high level, this is very non-invasive. You don't have to go to the hospital, although we will start in the clinic. But there is no lab. So we're not going to send a bag of breath. We're not going to send a column of breath where the humidity has been removed. This works in a normal breath, humid environment. So we're pretty excited about that. And of course, no radiation compared to CT scan. We can get into this slide a little bit later, but pretty much everybody else in the breath space is doing some form of mobility, ion mobility spectroscopy, or gas chromatography type approach, getting very specific. We are looking a different approach, which is cross-reactive array and looking at thousands of chemicals and their electrical responses. Well covered in patents, as you can see here, covering 8 different categories. We can dive here more deeply if we'd like. In terms of customers, providers, patients, and payers, there's a great alignment, whether it's informing physicians, giving peace of mind for patients that are normally told, hey, let's wait and see if this is actually cancer and it grows to something bigger. We don't want that to happen. It's not the best place to be. And then for payers, lowering costs, giving them lower claims costs is where they want to be as well. Commercialization, we'll do de novo clinical trial. There is no predicate. We will do most likely PLA codes for early reimbursement, get those codes prior to FDA approval. And we have clinical partners that are building up. The first one is Auna, which is in Latin America. The team mostly comes from Boston Scientific. We have the founding scientist who, if taken by aliens, would be difficult for us to move forward, Liam. But we have others. His sidekick, Rhea, our chief of product, has been working on this for 5 years. Randy Sistel was, until a few months ago, the global head of R&D for all of Boston Scientific. He's our CEO. He's come over. Greg Peterson from the University of Minnesota. He's worked on this for nearly a decade as well. And Morgan's our independent board member. Raising $5 million again. I want to leave a few minutes here for discussion. And of course, there are people that would most likely be very interested in technologies like this, because once proven a couple times with FDA approvals on a few cancers, we can imagine this, people really seeing this as a platform and extending it beyond into other cancers and outside of cancer. So I'll pause there and leave a little bit of time for questions. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ping. Great presentation. Liam, what questions did you have?
Yeah, thank you, Ping. That was awesome. I really liked the phrase mass spec in your hand. Won't resonate with everyone, but resonated with me. And also your ROC curve is very impressive, your specificity and sensitivity. I think the first thing I wanted to ask is if you have any evidence yet, if you can distinguish between different types of lung cancer, like non-small cell lung cancer, and the craze happening there right now.
Yeah, we can definitely between small cell versus non-small cell. It's quite a very different disease. We think that as we go beyond the couple hundred people we've tested, we're going to see those differences begin to spread out, like in that box plot. We can show clearly cancer versus healthy. Right now, cancer versus those that look like cancer, maybe with some kind of granuloma. That population is looking, there's a slight overlap, but as we actually test more, we really will, I think we're going to see even more separation. We are able to see kind of exciting, which I'll share with this group. We were looking at people that were biopsy negative and then were actually cancer.
Oh, wow.
And we were able to identify them as cancer. And we hope to tell a really good story as we delve into this data even more. We actually just received the follow-up information from the physicians, and hopefully there's even more data there. But yeah.
And then taking a slightly wider aperture on the same question, do you have any evidence or intuition that this would be applicable to Alzheimer's and the other non-cancer diseases you mentioned?
Yeah, so we're measuring this. So number one is yes. It's already clear that within Alzheimer's, there's about, was it 18 or 20 VOCs that statistically significantly shift? Okay. I took that out of the backup. And then within Parkinson's, there's about 7 or 8 that VOCs that statistically significantly shift. This device should pick up those because those fall under particular chemical families that we already pick up. So I expect that is a high probability.
And then last question on my end, depending on how much time we have, Paul, but how much does Boston Scientific own, or what's the relationship? Is this a spin out? Could you give more color there?
Yeah, great question. Number one is they own about 8%. On the cap table, you'll see 14% set aside for University of Minnesota, but University of Minnesota has a side agreement with Boston Scientific. It was just easier that way to do it. And so they share that 14%, University of Minnesota and Boston Sci. And they will share in 5% of net sales once we go to commercialization. And then number three is from an IP standpoint, we exclusively license all the patents. It was developed by my team when they were at Boston. So there was a lot of kind of cross work when the IP was created. So Boston and Randy, who is now our CEO, he really led the way on saying, okay, Boston, we're going to give it all to U of M, and then U of M, you're going to exclusively license it back to this team that created it.
Great. Thanks, Ping, for that. We have a question for you in the chat box. While we bring on our next presenter, maybe you can type in an answer to everybody for that question.
Okay.
And thanks so much for the pitch there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Next, we have Howard Bates and Mike Saddle of Pivot CX. Howard, Mike, if you go and load your slides, we'll kick off with your presentation.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, great.
All right. Thanks, Hall. And, thanks to you and your team for putting this on. And Liam, your presentation was really enlightening. I'm Mike Seidel. I'm the CTO here at Pivot CX. This is Howard. He's our CEO. We're the founders of Pivot CX, and we're out there simplifying talent acquisition and HR communication. So have you ever applied for a job and just never heard back? Well, it's not because recruiters don't like you. It's because they're really, really busy. And in fact, SHRM did a study, and they found that most recruiting people and most HR people log into 21 different systems every day just to do their job. A lot of communication is just missed. A lot of people are emailing when they should be sending text messages. You're not going to hire a forklift driver with an email. A lot of times we have recruiters and HR people trying to call people. They're getting screened. Nobody's answering. And as a result of that, about half of the recruiting advertising spend gets wasted, and qualified candidates just never hear back from the recruiter. SHRM reports that about 60% of employees cite lack of communication or poor communication as the reason they quit. Turnover is really expensive operationally and financially, and it's really no surprise that 74% of HR and recruiting teams don't hit business objectives. So what's special about Pivot CX? Well, we've got great product market fit. We're ready to rapidly scale our revenue with funding. We've landed some fantastic customers like Kelly Services, Great Clips, Community Healthcare, 7-Step, Self Opportunity, and Hornblower. These are all really large companies, and we've been really fortunate to have landed them. And we'll talk about what we're doing for each of them in a little bit. Our leadership team has a great depth of experience, over 70 years in HR tech, and about 30 exits between Howard and I and our board of advisors. We're creating a new category in work tech called a communications hub. And we own all of our IP, and we're positioned to leverage that. And we are going to be putting some AI features into our product in the fall and going into winter. So what gets us excited about what we're doing? Well, for one thing, our target market is big. If you look at our TAM, it's huge. But what gets me most excited is our CAGR is about 20% through 2030. So we're going to see growth for a long time. And it's a big enough market when you look at SOM that there's room for us and even competitors inside of that 209 million.
And that's really the other thing, is that's just the US market.
So how do you solve communication problems in HR and in recruiting? Well, we think it's our product, Pivot CX. It's a communication hub that hooks up to your applicant tracking system, to your HRIS, and enables communication across multiple channels. So we can talk voice, video, text, email, and some web communication. And that allows recruiters to focus more on their job, do away with about 11 of those 21 systems they have to deal with, gives them access to the right channel to get their message out, and allows them to recover about half their ad spend, get about 29% of their day back, and allows them really to personalize everything at scale in a way that they never thought possible. And with effective employee engagement, there's some amazing things you can do. And we'll talk about what we've done for Kelly Services there in a minute. One thing that's really important to us, we built our product so that it's designed for both humans and AI bots to be combined and automate and accelerate communication. We've designed this so you can plug in all of your existing systems and not have to have 21 different screens open just to do your job. It's really saves a lot of time for our users. Just a quick look at our screen, and our business model is very, very straightforward. We're a B2B SaaS company. Most of our customers are contracting with us annually. I think our last 4 deals, out of those, 3 of those prepaid for the year. And as you look at our pricing, the pricing you're seeing on the screen is what we sell our product at. And we typically get a higher selling price than what our base monthly prices are. And that's because we have a really, really well selected group of upsells that we have to make. And most of our customers will combine silver level or gold level with additional teams or messages. So we've done pretty well in keeping our ARR above what our projected ARR would be. Based on those prices. Here's a quick look at our pipeline, some of our existing customers down here at the bottom, and then what's in the pipeline. We do sell across 2 channels. We have a direct sales channel and a partner channel. Our partners are companies that are consulting companies and recruitment ad agencies. They're out there really connecting with employers and recommending our product and implementing our product. And then for some of our customers, we work directly. So let's take a look at a couple of our marquee customers. We'll start with Community Health Network, and I'm really excited about this one because we got some really good news yesterday afternoon. They actually hit their renewal and renewed and plussed up a little bit on the contract. So they're the largest employer in the state of Indiana. We came in, everybody that gets hired at Community Healthcare has conversations with recruiters across voice and text with Pivot CX. We replaced 3 different incumbent systems, and they're up to have replaced, I think, 4 now. And over the next year, they'll take a few more systems out of circulation. We're really excited about that deal because we won against a competitor, and they've renewed and grown. Kelly Services hired us for a really unique use case, and this is employee engagement. They had a problem. They have 4,300 translators that are supposed to be clocked in and ready to translate your phone call on demand. And the problem they had was that, about 26% weren't showing up on time or weren't showing up to their shift at all. And so they hired us to go in and automate messaging every one of their translators to tell them what time their shift would begin, what time it would end, when their breaks were, about 30 minutes before their shift started, so they'd have time to get online. That cut their absentee rate in half and made a huge difference in their business. And as a result, they have other teams at Kelly now trying Pivot CX out, and we think that account's going to expand quite a bit. And then the last one, Great Clips, 4,500 stores, 750 different franchise owners. They had us engage their existing talent community of 220,000 stylists and asked us to text every one of them and engage them and have a conversation. And if they're qualified, get them to the franchise owners in the market where they wanted to work. They asked us to deliver 2,000 candidates in a little, just about a year. And we were able to deliver in under 11 months, 5,200 candidates. So we think the future is going to be pretty bright with Great Clips. I mentioned earlier, we do sell through 2 channels. It's about a 60-40 mix between the channel partners and direct sales. And a quick look at who some of our partners are who are out there representing Pivot CX. And we're really excited about these because we started doing partnerships about 1 year ago, and we knew that it would be a little bit of a grind to get to where we finally would get results out of that. And we're really happy to see that we've had hopefully bring in a few new deals to us already. Self Opportunity has started producing. Field of Talent has produced for us. And 7-Step now has got 4 clients on the table now with us. So we're seeing our partnership investment pay off. Just a quick look at competition. We do have competition. Most of these are single channel communication products that get used in the HR and recruiting lifecycle. Most of them plug into an ATS or an HRIS. But our biggest advantage is that we do voice, video, and web, and most of these other platforms only do text messaging. And we integrate with over 128 different ATSs, CRMs, and HRISs out of the box. My next best competitor can only integrate with 1/5 of the number of systems that we integrate with. So I'm going to turn it over to Howard to really give you the important part here.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think Mike, you really did the important part. So I'm just going to give you a little sense here of where we are in terms of performance. So a lot of SaaS companies all have key metrics that, investors as well as operators, look at all the time. And I think there are a couple here I'll just highlight very quickly. So Q1 last year over Q1 this year, we grew 117% platform revenues. We were really proud of that. Our CAC, which is our customer acquisition payback number, is right around 2 months, which basically indicates to Mike and I and potential investors that we put money into this and invest in it, we can generate a lot of quick revenue. And it's very, very, very cost effective. Margins right now are right around 66%. They will improve with scale because there's some cost. Obviously, we know there's some fixed cost in this. And as revenue scales above that, the margins we think will wind up being in the 75 to 80% range. And really in Q1, we closed 8 new logos. So pretty good. I know folks love to know, okay, what are you thinking about, or what's the exit landscape potentially look like? So we put together a real quick little scenario for you to get a feel for that. So really, if you look at Q1 in 2023, there was $2.3 billion worth of deals done, 88 in total. Q1 M&A activity, 12.4 billion in this space, 31 deals. There are a lot of very active private companies in this space, some that you may be familiar with, like Bullhorn, UKG, a lot of advertising there and so on. And there are a lot of public acquirers like ADP, which you may not think that they would be one, or Workday. And really, if I look at it right now, we're targeting getting to 200K of MRR by the end of Q1. That's our target, assuming we get funded and we can get the business development team on the field here. And if we can grow the business to that level, then we've built a pretty profitable company. And again, we're projecting aggregate growth rate over the next 4 years of over 100%. And if we can do that, I think all the investors here will be really well rewarded. So kind of gives you a feel for what's going on. I know Mike's got me right now on on what are we doing here. So basically what we're doing is raising $1.5 million to $2 million right now. We're getting quite a bit of interest. We're really just getting going on this raise right now. We're very fortunate. This slide's not updated with this, but where we are right now, we have a lead investor, Elevate Ventures out of Indiana. They've committed 500K. We're trying to raise 1.5 million. This is actually now a priced round. It's not a convertible note. Initially, we thought that's what everybody would want. But as we got feedback, they said, we really want a priced round. So I'll tell you real quickly what that is. It's a $6 million pre-money. We've got about 75 to 80K of MRR right now. So post-money valuation in this would be 7.5 million to 8, depending on whether we do 1.5 million or 2. And that kind of gives you a feel for the economics. Now, where's that money going to go? And that's a question that's really important. So the vast majority of that's going in to fund 3 sales folks. I'm going to say this, Mike and I are proud of this fact, but at this point, we don't even have one dedicated salesperson, and we're generating this kind of revenue. Now, I mean, I could say we do have a partnership guy. We brought him in late September of last year. He's starting to get some really good traction. So we're excited about being able to bring on 3 dedicated sales resources. And we actually have the #1 ad agency, marketing agency in this space ready to go as soon as we get our funding. Mike will add maybe 1 senior and 1 junior sales folks. And that's kind of where that investment's going to go. And we think that'll get us way beyond the 200K of MRR certainly within 12 months.
And with that, we can switch over, give it back to you, Hall, for questions.
Oh, great. Thanks, William. I know it's not a deep tech deal, but what are your thoughts there?
No worries. And thank you very much for the really great presentation. One thing I'd be curious to hear about is how you upsell customers from silver to gold, and what your percentage is for those who start silver and then become gold so far.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Mike and I can kind of ham and egg that. But basically, a lot of people will come in. Our typical model, to give you an idea, is a 90-day pilot. That's kind of what people want. And we've scoped out a fairly simple use case for that. So we can prove, okay, that use case works. There are a whole slew of things that can be added. And that typically is with one team. A team is kind of the unit of measure. Actually, think of that, Liam, as a phone number, a single number, and everything pivots off that. The voice over IP, video, everything's associated with that. And then what happens is those individuals say, oh, I've got a recruiting team on the West Coast, or I have a high volume group, or I have the executive group. And so we're able to sell additional teams for $200 to $300 a month. And I'll, with this crowd on here, those are high profit margin additions. So our incremental cost for that's very minimal.
To give you an idea, Liam, so community healthcare as an example started with just 8 teams, and by the end of the first year, they were at 15 teams. So,
and why did community health go with you over your competitor? Did they say?
Well, actually, yes, they did. And we took away one of our competitors. That was their largest account. So the thing that really, there were a couple things, but the main one was they wanted to integrate into their legacy applicant tracking system, which happens to be Oracle's Taleo. Now, I'm going to say Taleo's platform is not exactly one of the most innovative platforms on the planet. So Oracle is really milking that. But it's very difficult to displace applicant tracking systems once they're in there. It's very costly. And so we were able to demonstrate bidirectional interoperability within their ATS. They loved it. Another one was the fact that their competitor actually didn't have the other channels of communication. So they were simply just text. And they did not have campaigning capability as well, which is a really big one. And that capability was being able to, what you would think of as lead nurture. I mean, if we look at recruiting as sales, a lot of people, in that industry don't, but that's really what it is. And so it's really like a lead nurture where we're sending out automated messages over time, and realize the applicant pool for Community Health Network is 1.6 million candidates. That's what they have in there. And right now we're just getting to the point where we're doing remarketing to the candidates that have come in, and maybe they didn't convert. We all know sometimes you're ready for a job change, sometimes you aren't.
Wonderful. Always a good signal.
Yeah, it's good. And really right now we have, I don't think in the last year we've lost one pilot, so they've all converted.
Great. Well, I think we're near the end of our time, guys. Thanks so much for the great presentation. Liam, thanks so much for your presentation as well, and great questions from the audience. And Ping, also appreciate your sharing your deal with us today. For those in the audience, if you'd like to learn more about any of these deals, we've polled you, and we can also follow up with you afterwards to get further feedback from you guys. With that, we'll go ahead and close it out for today, but I want to thank everybody for joining us. And with that, we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.